And the three of us.
Hello.
Hi, Clyde. Good afternoon.
Hi, thank you for having me here.
Yes, well, thank you for taking the time. We'll spend about 30 minutes. There are three of us on the vacancy committee. Take 1 minute to introduce ourselves. I'm Laura Lewis, mayor, and was one of the two Fifth Ward Alder people. So I'll kick it over to Rob Gerhart.
Yeah, hi, Clyde. How you doing? I am on Common Council representing the 3rd Ward, and I'm the outsider of the 5th Ward.
Hi, Clyde. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Hi, Clyde. I'm Robert Cantelmo. I represent the 5th Ward, and just for, I think, everyone's edification, our interviews are recorded.
Yes, all of our interviews will be recorded and will be shared with Common Council and with the public. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you for letting me know. And it's nice to meet all of you. And I look forward to sort of speaking more.
All right. Well, Clyde, perhaps you could start by telling us what do you see as the role of alderperson and what do you hope to achieve if you're on council?
Sure, absolutely. First, let me say, and I think it's sort of important to acknowledge, I'm a Cornell student, I'm an ILR, and this is, I understand sort of students hold an unusual place in the city. And I think it's important to acknowledge that before I go forward, and that informs my view of the role of an alderperson. I think I sort of contribute something in particular, which is sort of representing the issues that affect both the neighborhood, but also students. On Common Council, I mean, I think sort of a big priority for me is the affordability crisis. I think both that's making sure keeping taxes down for permanent residents, but also making sure that students can afford to live here and that we can attract sort of diverse talent from across the country to come to Ithaca. And I also think it's sort of public transportation with the TCAT sort of MOU coming up again. I want to look at ways where we can have a sustainable transit network that supports the sort of diverse populations in Ithaca with different needs, whether or not that's folks sort of commuting in or students, and making sure a way that's sort of paid for equitably, which I really think is important to ensure sort of the long-term viability of quality public transit in Ithaca. And I think that's also important for climate goals to make sure that we sort of have clean transit and are transitioning in that direction. As an older person, my focus and part of the reason I'm applying here would be to focus on public service. That's really what guides me. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't really believe in the value of public service and representing constituents. I mean, I think local government functions best when the representatives, the people sitting on these sort of different organizations are really responsive to the needs of their constituents, which I understand sort of, I'm a student, but the 5th Ward does not, includes large parts of Fall Creek. So part of my mission would be to understand the needs of different residents and spend a lot of time doing that.
Thank you. Can you tell us what you think the biggest challenges are facing the city and what are your thoughts on how to address them?
Sure. I mean, I think housing problems long term, and I think this is an issue that not only affects Ithaca, but affects folks across the country. No one's really immune. In this country, I think we were sort of uniquely positioned, and this is just my diagnosis of the problem, where we subsidize demand, but restrict supply. And to me, that's sort of the critical problem here. To me, I think some of these solutions, and part of the reason I'm sort of applying and look more into are things like accessory dwelling units. What are the ways that we can sort of both preserve our neighborhoods while also ensuring that folks are able to, we sort of do increase the housing stock long term, and that we do sort of have a long-term orientation when it comes to addressing the affordability problems that folks have. I also think it's exploring new ways to look at sort of, other ways of looking at growing the housing supply, whether or not that's upzoning, making sure that we have sort of that growth that's needed. That being said, I also want to acknowledge and hopefully sort of convey a certain degree of humility that I certainly don't have all the solutions to Ithaca's problems. I'm certainly the newest person here, but I do have experience working on some related issues, and I think part of my passion for them comes from believing that there are solutions and that I could sort of do a good job representing the folks of the Fifth Ward in making progress on them.
Thank you. And kind of the flip side of the last question, what do you think is the biggest opportunity in Ithaca right now?
Yes, this is what sort of I think most excites me, is that Ithaca is uniquely positioned. I mean, I was sort of surprised the other day to learn that Ithaca is actually part of the Appalachian Regional Commission and in Appalachia, right? But Ithaca is a place where we have sort of tremendous brain power, and that doesn't exist in a lot of places in New York State and in the country. And so I think it's finding ways of retaining that and of using the incredible talent we have here for economic development. It was certainly really exciting to see outside of Syracuse and Onondaga County earlier this year with the CHIPS Act and all the money that's going in there to revitalize Western New York. But I think it's important to find ways that Ithaca can sort of be part of that. We have these sort of tremendous, we have the university and the college here. And so some of my focus would be on looking to find ways that we can sort of keep folks here and we can orient that towards sort of an economic development mission.
Okay, thank you. How do you plan on connecting with your constituents and connecting your constituents with city government?
Sure, that's a great question. My answer, I think, is maybe a simple one, but an important one nonetheless, is I'm the sort of person who likes going door to door. Community meetings, civic associations, those are the places I want to be involved. And I think, and in considering this, and Patrick Mailer's a good friend of mine, I sort of talked to him about this, and I think one thing he impressed upon me was saying that it's not just about going to the city meetings, but it's about connecting in all the other ways that your constituents connect with local government, and being sort of cognizant of that. And I think to me that's important. So it's, some of that's door to door, which I would absolutely want to do if selected, but it's also finding other avenues that constituents or that my constituents sort of engage with local government. And it's being committed to being a presence and being sort of, fulfilling the whole role.
Okay, thank you. So we also want to offer you an opportunity to just make a closing statement. If there is anything you wish to share with us that's not been included in one of the questions, please let us know.
Sure. I think, I sort of, one thing I would like to sort of add, I think is important, is that I'm really passionate about this, and I really believe I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't believe in the power of municipal government to improve people's lives. I think sort of as coming back to the last question, local governments are uniquely positioned to be in contact with the constituents they represent and be flexible and adjust to meet their needs. And to me, that's something that seems like a terrific opportunity. I spent a lot of time working on sort of similar issues downstate. In the village that I'm from, I worked on village consolidation, which was looking at how do we reduce the tax burden and consolidate municipal services. Certainly that's not the sexiest thing, and that's something you run a campaign on, but to me is really important and the type of work that I enjoy doing. I also work with the Cornell Prison Education Program, doing some of the reentry work. And what to me is that about, and sort of that's a lot of, I think that's constituent service by sort of a different name, but working with guys who are coming out, who have earned their bachelor's degree in prison, and many of whom are coming back to Western New York, a number of which are in Ithaca. We work with the folks at the Sunflower Homes, and I've sort of been there a number of times to connect them and making sure that there's sort of stable housing there. But yeah, I really enjoyed this work, and I sort of want to make this clear. I'm not the type of person who comes in because sort of I like the title or the idea of sort of being an alder person, but the work's really important to me. I grew up, my mother's a 4th generation union member. You know, my grandmother's uncle, who only passed away about 2 or 3 years ago, was chief of staff of the CIO, but sort of the union heritage is in my blood, and sort of that idea of sort of the notions of solidarity are really important to me, and finding ways of sort of bringing citizens together to improve their lives is something I'd like to do. And I understand I may not be the sort of most natural fit, but I do think I can do a good job of both representing these sort of permanent residents and the students, both of whom have very real concerns and ties to this city. And I look forward, even if not selected or selected, to being a presence here and contributing to the city for however long I may live here.
Okay, thank you. Do you have questions for us?
Yes, I do. And I guess I should ask, since I have three members of the Common Council in my presence, what do you feel is sort of the largest challenges for someone coming onto the Common Council? And sort of what are the best ways of dealing with those?
Turn to my colleagues.
Yeah, sure. No, it's a great question. So I'm just now entering my 8th year on Common Council, which also happens to be my final year on Common Council, as I've decided not to run again. I think the biggest challenge for any new council member is just understanding the vast range of issues, right? And there are times when you can sort of get by with just understanding a surface, but more often than not, we really do need to dig a little deeper, which is a challenging role for us in a part-time role, especially many of us have other full-time commitments, and so finding a balance where you can sort of understand that wide range of things, and they come pretty quickly. They don't trickle in. So being able to manage that is big. And I think some of the hot button issues that we'll be facing this year, you mentioned some of them. We continue to have housing stresses. We need to make some progress on the Ithaca Green New Deal. There's many other things, but those are some of the things that come to light, and the housing struggles, of course, will rely on some of the things you mentioned, like we don't have it necessarily on our plan yet, but probably bringing back the conversation on ADUs. So yeah, Rob probably has some other things to add.
I'm going to largely agree with what Rob said. I think I'll throw up another point of agreement on the implementation of both the Green New Deal and continuing our conversation and implementation of the public safety reform. I mean, I think our community has made some really big promises in recent years that we've done a lot of work to advance, but we're really in the thick of it right now. And we really, to Rob's point about kind of digging deep on the issues, we need folks who are going to be able to give sustained attention to not just the conceptual, but the implementation. And ensuring that, these problem areas that have been identified are addressed in an impactful and a sustainable way.
Yeah, and I will just add, this is going to be a year of transition as we move to council manager, city manager structure. We also have a working group looking at unsanctioned encampments and addressing issues around unhoused. So those are 2 other of the issues in addition to what my colleagues have mentioned.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And would you feel, thank you for that. That's sort of helpful to understand what's coming up on the agenda for this coming year. Where do you feel most of the work for dealing with those types of issues occurs? Are those in committees? Is that in the common council meetings, but where are sort of alder persons most effective in devising solutions to these problems?
Yeah, I suggest it's probably about an equal split between the time you spend in common council meeting, the full meeting with your committee assignment, depending on your role, and your liaison appointments, because we all have appointments to different things representing the city and representing common council. And then I think there's the fluctuating time that you spend outside of all those meetings getting prepared, and that varies greatly on what the topics are and what your assignments are. So it can be a real, that's the wild card piece of it. I don't know, Rob, how's that? My experience is a little different than yours. 7 years versus 1, but probably similar.
I think that gets at the heart of it. Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that we have incredibly talented city staff.
Yes.
So we may be looking at, we will and do look at policy issues in order to work toward implementation, whether we're talking about the Green New Deal, reimagining public safety, a number of issues. We really rely on the work of our expert staff.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad to hear that. How do you feel the new city structure or the charter revisions will change the role of alderperson, or was it in fact functionally remain the same? And is it more just to your role, Mayor Lewis?
I think that is something that we will be developing and working on and clarifying for ourselves and the public. Now that the referendum has passed, we know that we will be moving forward with this new structure. There's a great deal of work that will need to take place over the course of this coming year.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I do agree that for the most part, the alderperson position will be similar, but the mayor's role is quite different, and all of our interactions with the city manager make it all very different.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that seems like a very sensible answer, especially since that's sort of, this is just a process that you all seem to be at the beginning of. Yeah, as for the couple of the issues you mentioned, it's interesting with the sort of reimagining public safety. I worked on an EO 203 project back in the summer through, I guess, June or in May, June of 2021. So it was just a little under a year. And it's interesting to see how that sort of continues to rear its head as sort of a long-term challenge. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that the city is sort of committed to implementing that vision. And that's something I'd sort of be excited to work on, so I can understand how potentially challenging that is with a multitude of sort of different groups and interests that exist in the public safety sphere. But I guess I should say thank you for having me. It's been very enjoyable to speak with all of you. And I look forward to being more involved in the sort of work and the life of the city.
Thank you, Clyde. I do want to give you some information in terms of our timeline.
Sure.
We have interviews today and tomorrow.
Mhm.
We will plan to bring a recommendation. So our vacancy committee makes a recommendation to Common Council. Common Council votes on that recommendation. Our council meetings occur the first Wednesday of every month. So last night was the first council meeting of 2023, and February 1 will be our February meeting. And we are hopeful that we'll bring forward a recommendation at that time.
At the February 1 meeting?
Correct.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. You sound like you'll work a little more speedily than the U.S. House right now. I'm
High bar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My interest is always this parliamentary stuff, and I do a lot of parliamentary work, and it's like, oh my God, this is just horrifying to watch how inefficient this all is. But the process exists for a reason, so I suppose we have to respect that. But yeah, thank you all very much. And it was nice to have a chance to speak with you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Clyde. Very
Clyde.
nice to speak to you.
Yeah, really nice
Thanks,
to meet
Clyde. Be
you.
well.
Yep,
Nice to
thank you
meet
for
you
the
too.
time.
All right. Good luck and take care.
Take care. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi, Jack. Good
Hi,
afternoon.
Jack.
Hi, everyone.
Thanks for taking the time to meet with us. We have about 30 minutes and we have a few prepared questions for you to address. First, Jack, what do you see as the role of alderperson and what would you hope to achieve in that role?
Sounds great. So the first thing I think the alderman would want to focus on would be constituent services. Oftentimes there are constituents who are having trouble accessing unemployment insurance benefits or having trouble reaching the VA. And oftentimes local officials help liaison with the respective federal or state agency. So that's something that I've done in the past when I was an intern for Senator Schumer and then a staffer for Anna Kellis. I spent months and months working with local officials to ensure that constituents were able to access their unemployment benefits, their VA health benefits, that sort of stuff. The second thing I would say would be legislative work. So there are a lot of issues that have a very important impact on people's lives. For example, public safety, climate, cost of living. And it's up for aldermen to ensure that they are meeting with their colleagues, meeting with members of the community, meeting with experts, and working together to craft policy that there's consensus on and will make a positive difference. And I think the third thing would just to be a very positive example for younger people and people in the community, so that when there's a young person, 10-year-old, 11-year-old, and they're going to the polls with their mom or their dad, and they ask their parents, you know, who is representing us at the city level, you would really want that person to think that their alderman is a respectful person who treats people well and is responsive to their needs. So setting a good example as well. So I think it would be the constituent services work, it would be the legislative work, and then it would be being a good person and showing a really positive example for younger people.
Thank you, Jack. And my apologies. I jumped right into a question without first introducing our vacancy committee. So I'll do that now. Laura Lewis, you and I believe have met before. Mayor and I served on the 5th Ward. Obviously, this is the vacancy that we're discussing. I'm joined by colleagues. Turn it over to Alderperson Gerhart.
Yep. Hello, Jack. I am in my 8th year on Common Council representing the 3rd Ward. And I'm sort of the outsider in the group. Our vacancy committee is made up of the representatives from the ward that we're replacing, as well as one other member of Common Council. So tag on it.
Sounds good. Great to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Hey, Jack. Nice to see you. We, of course, know each other. I'm Robert Quintelmo for Public Edification. I am the current sitting alderperson for the 5th Ward, who will be the counterpart for this vacancy.
Nice to see you, Rob.
The other thing we should mention is that we are recording all of the interviews we conduct, and those interviews will be shared with members of Common Council and the public. So are you okay with recording?
It sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Jack, I wonder if you could address what do you think are the biggest challenges facing the city, and how would you address those challenges?
So I think the first major challenge is public safety. I think Cornell students have gotten very accustomed to emails every month talking about a different sexual assault or different rape on campus. And it's not been once or twice, but several times to see the street represented being the street that my girlfriend and I live on. So over the last few months, whenever my girlfriend walks in my house at night, I'll call her, we'll stay on the phone together so that if something happens, she'll know, I'll know that we can call for help. So for young people to feel safe walking on campus and for people in the community to feel safe is something that I think is a very pressing issue. And as a vice president of Cornell Democrats, we've worked and held events with the Reimagining Public Safety group. And that's something that's critically important, because just as I would want my girlfriend and me to feel safe, different people feel safe in the police in different ways. So I think I would be very involved in making sure that all groups are being represented in those discussions. The police officers, service members, people of the queer community, people of color. I think everyone needs to be part of those discussions so that we're reimagining the police in a way that increases safety, not reduces safety for all groups. I think climate is a major thing. It's something that my generation cares just so much about. And if you talk to people who are 15, 16 up to 22, which I am, it's going to be likely the most important thing they'll say. And Ithaca is leading by example on climate, first city to announce a 100% plan for electrification. I want to be in the details, in the weeds on that. I've taken a lot of climate policy classes, studied under some great scholars at Cornell, and I've learned kind of what cost-effective, sensible, and effective policy looks like. And I want to work with everyone on council so that we're actually achieving results on this electrification work. We're bringing in private partners, we're bringing in partners from state and federal, and of course, we're bringing in all the community partners. So I would see myself very involved in the details on that, relying upon as well a lot of the climate policy that I did in Anna Callis's office on the CCIA, on the crypto moratorium. This is an issue that I deeply care about. I think if we're really smart about it and we bring in all the experts and we work with the private sector and other levels of government, I think Ithaca will be incredibly effective at implementing this really awesome plan to electrify and decarbonize buildings. The third thing I would just say would be affordability in the city. This is an issue that I'm less studied on. It's something that I would probably look more to my colleagues on, but Ithaca is an amazing place. And I would want to make sure that people of all income levels are able to live there to some extent. So I know there's this proposed building near the waterfront, and I was pleased to see that a portion of that is affordable housing. So I think that the council needs to address and think about, as it has been already, the importance of addressing and giving some affordable housing in places. So as alderman, like I said, I'm not an expert on all issues. I would likely focus on a few, learn about the other ones, and defer to colleagues on the ones in which they're experts on.
Okay, you began to touch upon this. The flip side of the challenge question, of course, is what are the greatest opportunities in Ithaca right now? How would you identify those?
Yeah, so I just talked a lot about the climate piece and the reimagining public safety piece. So I'll pick up more on the climate piece. So Ithaca has led on so many issues in the past, led on abortion in the 1970s with Assemblywoman Connie Cook, and then up till today with the decarbonization electrification plan. It's just so exciting to see the council and then the former mayor and the current mayor really attuned to that. And I think the challenge now will be to make sure that experts are really driving implementation, and it doesn't just become something for show, and they're actual achievable goals. And we have people in the council who want to work with scholars at Cornell and other cities at the state and federal level to ensure that the private money continues to come in, and these companies like Black Power and others, their progress is clear to the public, and that there's some sort of way to publicly understand the progress that's been made in terms of the number of buildings, that sort of transparency, that sort of attention, I think would increase the opportunity for Ithaca to not only achieve its goals, but act as a model to other cities. And other cities, according to the news that I've read, have already been calling up and learning about Ithaca's work. So I think climate is a major, major source of opportunity for Ithaca. And I just think the second thing I would say would be the enormous educational and research hubs that is Ithaca College and Cornell. My grandparents met 60 years ago in Ithaca. My grandma at Ithaca College, my Papa Sam at Cornell, and they've gone on to do incredible work, driven by the scholarship and amount they've learned at their universities in Ithaca. My grandfather and grandma founded a cancer research foundation that raises millions of dollars for cancer research. And since I was young, those were people who I looked up to and I wanted to emulate. So I've kind of seen firsthand that Ithaca produces people who want to make the world a better place, them through science and research, and hopefully me through working as an alderman in Ithaca and the work I've done in the past and hope to do in the future. So just to summarize, it'd be the climate piece, making sure that implementation is done in a way that is cost effective and gets done, and also we liaison with other cities so our impact could possibly be multiplied. And then just continuing to support Ithaca College and Cornell because they produce incredible science and students every single year.
Thank you. Jack, how would you plan to connect with your constituents and connect your constituents with city government?
I think it would just be having a lot of one-on-one conversations, which is kind of one of the best ways to invest your time, in my opinion, as a representative. Just hours of chats with constituents in their houses or out and about. And those relationships would be great because I would get a much better sense of some of the subtleties and realities that some constituents are facing, because the three major issues I talked about earlier, those are things that a lot of people care about. But I think if I were in the position and I had a lot of those conversations, I'd realize that they're kind of maybe more things that are hiding behind the surface that are more nuanced, and I'd be able to work on. I also think, to address the second part of your question, when you have a representative who you're chatting with and you have a relationship with, that increases your respect and your interest in the legislative branch and council. And that makes them want to submit public comment, attend any public events that the council is plugging. Maybe it might be an executive branch city agency that's putting on a COVID thing or something like that. If council has strong relationships with constituents, that's a great way to attract Ithacans to come. So that's one of the most appealing parts of being an alderman, getting to have those relationships and those conversations. I remember the first one I ever had, it was when I just started being a petitioning for the 5th Ward to be on the Democratic Committee. I had a 2-hour chat with the Mrazek family. It was the first door I knocked on, and I had no idea what to expect. We just talked and learned so much about their acute needs for the city. Got a lot of stories about their time in Ithaca and all of that. So would love to have those chats. I think it's the best way to get to know constituents, and for the constituents to best get to know me and the council.
Thank you. We also want to allow time for you to make any closing statement, share any information that you've not yet shared through the questions.
Thank you. So I have a few things that I wanted to address in the interview that I haven't yet. So let me do that right now. So the first thing I wanted to address is being able to work with people who are older than I am. Most of the people on council are much older than me, in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, So I wanted to talk about my year working with Anna Kellis. So I was a full-time employee in that office, and I was working with 4 working moms in their 40s and 50s. And I had that experience working with people of that age. And it was a very, very different experience in my time being a student, and got to understand that timings are different. I had a lot of my colleagues would leave to pick up their kids and then come back, all of that. I was babysitting some of the kids at some points and got to know them very well as well. So that was cool. So I have that year of working with people older than me, have a deep amount of respect for working moms in particular, and for the spouses who support them when they are working till 10 p.m. to finish the state budget. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about. I also wanted to tell kind of my intro story to government, kind of why I have such a deep passion for it. And it starts when I was 17 years old. I was a senior in high school, and some of my best friends started to get addicted to e-cigarettes and nicotine. And it was so insidious because one second they were smoking these things that look like USB drives, and the next thing is they were leaving class every 30 minutes to go to the bathroom to Juul. And it just frustrated me so much, and it felt so unfair. So I decided to do something about it. I spent 3 years as an advocate towards more sensible regulation on these e-cigarette products. As an intern for Senator Schumer, I wrote a policy paper arguing that in 2009, Congress passed the Tobacco Control Act of 2009, and that put a ban on the flavors in cigarettes, but it exempted the flavors in e-cigarettes, which created a flavor loophole. And Big Tobacco used this loophole to addict my generation on nicotine. And I argued that this loophole had to be closed. And Senator Schumer's office thought this was a sensible proposition. And we held several press conferences together in New York City. And I invited a lot of my best friends who got addicted to these conferences, and they spoke and told their stories. And I met with FDA Commissioner at the time, Scott Gottlieb, Senator Dick Durbin, and a lot of other officials in the executive and legislative branches. And we told these stories, and I ended up making a video called Juulers Against Juul. Juulers because they're against Juul because they have to do it. And in this video, my best friends talked about what Juul is and how it negatively affects their lives and how they're unable to quit. And I got to speak on Good Morning America and BBC and other shows as well, talking about the epidemic that is teenage addiction to e-cigarettes and why sensible regulation was needed, particularly closing that flavor loophole from the Tobacco Act of 2009. And I started an organization called Students Against Nicotine to lobby at the county, state, federal level for this regulation. And a lot of my friends and peers, we worked together on this. And we all were in this organization together. And after many, many trips to Albany and some trips to DC, we were able to get, along with so many partners, encourage the Congress to pass just 2 years ago, the Tobacco 21, which was a really important piece of legislation that raised the age of tobacco products to 21. And then at the state level in New York, getting that flavor piece passed, so that now in New York State, those flavors in e-cigarettes are banned. And we are so grateful to the state legislature and to the governor's office for their work on that. And during this work, I got to speak at conferences and with students and got to meet so many students. And this work just affirmed my belief that when young people and people alike are involved, and they have working with legislators who care a lot about them and community and public health, great stuff's going to happen. So after that, I continued with this work, and after a lot of other things as well, like the time in Anna Kellis's office that I told you about, some more time in Senator Schumer's office, and some other experiences as well. Here I am. The last thing I want to share that I hadn't gotten a chance very much is the time I'd spent organizing the student community in the Fifth Ward. I co-led the voter registration efforts during this midterm. We registered over 100 people my age to vote, and most of whom had never voted before. Some of whom had voted in another state, and we transferred over here because of the inability for them to get the absentee ballot, or because it was a more competitive race here. But I loved that experience. I loved getting to talk to people my age about the issues they cared about, and also talk about why I cared. So I could definitely see myself continuing that student engagement in this position, both on the voter reg side and also on the policymaking and constituent services side. So I think that ability to work with the students in the ward, which is a really important part of the ward, and have conversations with them about what they care about, and also their ability to make their voice heard, state level and other levels as well, I think could be an asset in this position.
Thank you, Jack. Thanks very much. Do you have questions for us?
I do. Question I had was what you've learned about policymaking and being a representative while three of you have been serving in the council.
I'll turn to my colleagues first. Your responses?
So that's a great question. So, having now been through 7 years and in my 8th year, one of the things I learned early on is that we in this role, especially because it is seen more as a part-time role, and many of us would have full-time responsibilities in our day jobs. It was really important to recognize the value of city staff and the leadership within the city that sort of helps organize and make sure that staff works as effectively as possible and has the right working conditions and all that. So I think it really helps to understand that distinction, so you don't get in the weeds and things that are not our role, but we can focus more on things that are, such as the policy aspects of what we do. So I think that's an important distinction that comes into play. I'll let others chime in as well.
Yeah, I would definitely second what Rob just said. I think another piece of the part-time role that's worth emphasizing is, yes, it is part-time, but we also have honestly like a fairly limited number of opportunities to meet on any given month. And so really making sure that you're, well informed and apprised of the things that are happening on your committee, the things that are happening on other important committees, and the major projects that are percolating, whether it's through city staff initiatives or council initiatives, because a missed meeting, in city government means up to a month delay, right? And so an inability to make a decision can have an outsized impact. When you might, again, analogizing that to a day job, you might be able to push it to the next day. Timelines get pretty tight, as is probably evidenced by the fact that we've had a healthy number of 6+ hour meetings in the last year, including last night.
Yeah, and I'll just add that we do have meetings once a month, every first Wednesday of the month, Common Council. Then there are the 2 standing committees, and you have those standing committee chairs right here on this interview committee, from City Administration, which Robert chairs, and Planning and Economic Development, which Rob Gearhart chairs. And so there are liaison appointments, and Common Council members would be meeting with those organizations for which they serve as liaisons. There are also times during the year, and I'm thinking most particularly during budget season, which is multi-month long, that we will have more than one monthly meeting of council because of the issues at hand.
Thank you for that.
Sure. Any other question?
The last question I had, is there anything that you wanted me to address in this interview that I hadn't addressed yet? Any reservations or concerns?
I think we've covered quite a bit. So, and we are also being very aware of consistency by asking the same questions of all applicants. So we get the information that I believe is needed. I did want to share also our timeline. So we are conducting interviews today and tomorrow with the expectation of bringing a recommendation from our vacancy committee to Common Council at the February 1 meeting.
Thank you for that timeline. That's very helpful. And thank you so much for the opportunity to interview for this position. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I will be available if there are any other questions or anything else. But I really enjoyed the conversation. It was great meeting you, Robert, and Laura. Great seeing you again, and Rob, nice seeing you too.
Nice to meet you too, Jack. And I want to say I appreciate your comments about intergenerational working together. And I was very appreciative that you stopped at the 50s, since there are a few of us who will go in the next decade, and for you to not make that assumption is really nice. Thank you.
Of course.
Ditto.
Yeah, but otherwise, really nice to meet you, and thanks for the time.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Jack.
Be
Take
well,
care.
Jack.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, got it.
Thank you. Yes, so we are conducting interviews today and tomorrow. These interviews are recorded so that our colleagues and in fact the public will be able to see the interviews for the 5th Ward seat on Common Council. So we have about 30 minutes to chat, and we have a set of questions that we'll go over with you. But let's begin with introductions. My name is Laura Lewis, mayor and the individual who was an alderperson in the 5th Ward until my election this November. I'll turn it over to my colleagues for introductions.
Hi, Carol. Rob Gerhart from the 3rd Ward. Our vacancy committee calls for the other member of the ward for the seat that was vacated, as well as an outside member, and that's me.
Hi.
Hey.
And hi, Carol. I know we've spoken several times, but I'm Robert Cantelmo. I represent the 5th Ward.
Hi.
So Carol, could you begin please by telling us what you see as the role of alderperson and what you would hope to achieve in this role?
Well, sure. I read the description that's on the city website. The only thing I would add is that I think that it's really important for the alder people to communicate with the public or with residents. The back and forth between the city and everyone who makes up the city would be another thing I think is very important. We don't have the very best coverage in the city. The Journal years ago used to do a really good job, and they don't so much anymore. And the other coverage is spotty, and so I think it's up to the alder people to communicate, as Rob does with the 5th Ward. I don't know what the other alder people do.
It varies quite a bit. What would you hope to achieve yourself if you were selected?
I don't have any particular pet projects or pet interests for the city. I mean, there are things that I think are, they're important, that happen also to be things that are important this year. I think between the police and the people, there is a sacred trust that has to be honored and it has to be respected. And I'm not alone in thinking this, and I'm not alone in wanting to work toward the improvement of that relation. Well, not an improvement. I don't know where it's at, but just the strength of that relationship. That's all. I would hope that we'd have a good, strong relationship in that department, and of course in all others. And I know that there are a lot of very interesting people in this town who have some interesting ideas about labor relations or about transportation or about social services and homeless. And I don't really see everybody's ideas sort of being funneled in any way into decisions made in City Hall. So that's something I could imagine working toward, is involving more people in the ideas that Common Council and the mayor, or later the administrator, could choose among.
I think you were touching upon this, but can you just express what you see as the biggest challenges facing the city, and how, if you were on Common Council, you would address them?
Well, the biggest challenges to the city are the same challenges every other organization, institution, municipality, state in the country right now, is post-COVID, to find out how we're going to do things. Are we going to revert to the way we did things before, which were in some ways very good, in other ways maybe not so good? That's just a big challenge in terms of leading us toward how we do things. But beyond that, if you want a concrete and specific example, the police is a big issue, just because I shudder to think what could happen here or anywhere if relations with police or responders or fire department or National Guard or the Army were not good. That's just it's beyond thought. So I guess, while it's not I don't know enough about it, and it's not about personal interest, I'm just sure that kind of basis of working relationship has to be in place.
So that's one of a big umbrella of challenges. What would you identify as the biggest opportunities in Ithaca right now?
The opportunities, it's also a challenge too. It's interesting. I think the amount of growth that we've seen in the past 20 years suggests that we could be a very different city if this growth continues. The opportunities for more affordable housing, the opportunities for spreading out the tax burden. I just got my tax bill today, and I looked at it and I thought, okay, I know inflation was about 9% sometime during this past year. I don't think it's that high anymore. It might even, be adjusted to be half of that. But who knows? Who knows among residential homeowners what the commercial rate of taxation is? All anybody knows, if they're not well informed, is there's tax abatements every time somebody puts up any kind of building, whether they think they can, they need it or not. They ask for it and they get it, and that's just it's expected. Now, I don't know enough about it to say that it shouldn't happen, but I would say that growth is the biggest opportunity that we have, and we should use it wisely.
Okay, thank you. You referred to this earlier, but how would you plan to connect with constituents and connect constituents with city government?
Well, I would do it any way that I could in our neighborhood, not a little neighborhood. We've had a meeting of people who communicate to one another on the listserv, which gets kind of raucous sometimes. And we had a successful in-person meeting, which was nice. And then we attempted to go to the public school, to the elementary school, to Fall Creek Elementary, because it would be a good location to have our next meeting. But we're facing the fact that there are insurance liability issues with using a public school, and tried to go in under the umbrella, under the wing of the PTA, and then they've got issues. And I think public places maybe are off limits. We're going to have to go to one of the small restaurants or businesses, or somebody's going to have to open up their homes if we want to have a community-wide meeting that doesn't happen in nice weather. Do we really have to go to some private institution to do that? So that's one of those questions. I wouldn't send out any more newsletters without first meeting people. I think there's nothing wrong with newsletters. There's nothing wrong with email. There's nothing wrong with all that stuff is good. But I think one of the questions about getting back to COVID ways of doing things is in-person meetings are just so much different than distance meetings. That's one of the ways I would try to get the both of us involved with people, I think.
Mhm, mhm. Well, thank you, thank you. We also want to allow opportunity for applicants for this role to provide us with any closing statement, any aspects you would like to address that have not been included in the questions, anything you'd like us to know.
That you should know about me?
Yes,
just
your
generally,
interest in, yes.
Uh-huh. Well, I mean, my interest, why am I interested in doing this at all is that, now I lived here for 30 some years, and I think any place else I've been and anywhere else that I know anyone else lives, not better. They're different. They might be as good as Ithaca, but they're not better. The ratio of time it takes to get deep into nature and the time it takes to get to a good lecture or the time it takes to get to a performance, it's remarkable. I think after 9/11, I think, and after the financial crisis of 08, I think people, whether they moved here or not, and you could find out, you could just look at the immigration to the city since in the last 20 years and know whether people are really moving here and where they're moving from. I think they are, but even more than that, there are people who think about it and maybe they don't move because, of other reasons, or can't afford something, or they're still looking, or they're not deciding, or whatever. But I think there's a lot of interest in Ithaca from other places. I think a lot of people would rather live here than live in New York City now. And COVID certainly increased that. So I think we're in a good spot. We're in a very good spot, actually. I think we're a very desirable place for people to live. And we have to keep up the strength of the city, the town. I mean, it's curious. If I were to become an alderperson, I would just try to do a lot more background reading. I don't understand. I'm sure most people don't. Why historically we have a town of Ithaca. We had a town before we had a city and so on. But right now we have a layer of a city. We have a town. We have a county. Some of the issues are common to all of us. Some of them are probably better addressed, together and collectively. So that would be kind of fun to learn about that. I think of myself as living in the city, but I also think of myself as living in a county of 100,000 people.
Yes, that's a good point. Yes, we live in the city, but we are in the county, and in fact, we're the county seat.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have questions for us?
Are all the votes likely, or most votes taken at Common Council 9-0 or 8-1? Do you ever have 4 to 5 votes about anything?
Yeah.
We actually did last night. A 6-3 vote, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what sometimes is missed is, especially at the Common Council meeting, sometimes the issues are worked out prior to not only the Common Council meeting, but the committee meeting that a particular item came up through. So it might appear like we're unanimous, but it may have taken some work well prior to that to get us to a place where we could agree to a 9-0 vote, for example.
Thanks for your answer, because that's what I suspected, is that maybe most of the work, the back and forth, the discussion goes on, I don't know, elsewhere. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
I would
so
say even just, I'm sorry, Laura.
But we do have 2 standing committees, which you may know, the city administration and planning and economic development. So the work that comes before council most often comes up through committees. So we work within the committee, we work with city staff. So when it comes to council, in most instances, there are exceptions, of course. In most instances, council members have had exposure to a particular topic or issue or resolution previously.
I see. And what's the exact relationship between the council and, say, the planning board or the zoning board of appeals?
Yeah, so the Common Council has those two standing committees that Laura talked about. And then, there's a lot of volunteer citizen committees, boards, commissions. We as common council members often are assigned to be a liaison to some of these. So you might see a common council person at a meeting, like a planning board meeting. I don't know if we have a rep on that, but those are all sometimes things that come through common council. Sometimes they're quasi judicial where they can make decisions independent of council. So there is a whole structure that I think is really interesting for council members to get a handle on pretty quickly, to understand how things move through and on their way up to council.
So the standing committees doesn't include planning and development and
No, there is one called Planning and Economic Development Committee, but that does not deal with the same agenda that the Planning and Development Board does. And sometimes those things come through Planning and Economic Development on their way to council, but often they're not.
thanks for clarifying.
And I'll just also mention, Rob referred to liaisons,
Mhm.
and common council members do liaise with other committees, whether it's the Ithaca Urban Renewal Agency. There are a host of others, Southside Community Center, and the council liaison is intended to be an information conduit. So the liaison would attend a particular organizational meetings, but would not have a vote, but would bring information to that organization from council, and then in reverse would bring information from that organization back and report at every council meeting. There is opportunity for liaison reports.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I got the impression from the discussion last night that the liaison to, say, for the labor relations discussions would be just an observer. That's
Correct.
everyone's job.
Yeah, that's not unusual. So for example, I had been this past year the liaison to the Ithaca Landmarks Preservation Commission, or ILPC, which is a quasi judicial board in that it does have some authority to make decisions that don't necessarily come through common council. But we did provide a local designation, historic designation for a building on the Commons this year that did require common council vote. And so that I was able to bring the information from ILPC to my colleagues on common council to prepare them for the vote that was coming to them a few months ago.
I see. Is that the one on the corner of Green and Cayuga?
This was the
the
Firebrand Books building, was often
yeah.
as Home
Okay.
Dairy. So
Firebrand.
designating that building on the Commons, and I'm a non-voting member of ILPC, so I just usually go to observe.
Mhm.
They're happy when I contribute, but I don't have to. I don't get to vote on things.
I see.
And this year, Carol, we will also be working on transition to city government since the November referendum passed, the referendum calling for city manager. So there will be a council manager structure going forward. And we'll be spending 2023 working on that transition because it does change a number of things. For example, the authority of the mayor, and the city manager will report to common council. We do have a chief of staff currently. That individual is reports directly to the mayor.
So when will the city administrator's position begin?
January 2024.
Okay, I see. So you're going to restructure certain committees, activities, responsibilities for council members and others, including the mayor, between now and then.
Yes, not so much the committees, the standing committees, but that remains to be seen. When we're looking at a different city government structure, we'll be examining all possibilities.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah, I'd say the biggest change will be in the role of mayor. We'll still have a mayor, a citywide elected mayor, But they will have a different role. They won't oversee the departments. That will now become the job of the city manager.
So currently the mayor is the CEO, and that will change to the city manager. Now, one important distinction is currently in our current structure, the mayor does not have a vote, but going forward, the mayor will have a vote in the new structure beginning in 2024.
That's interesting. It reminds me of something that Rob and I touched on in one of our discussions as to why there are 2 representatives of each ward, a total of 10. I have no objection to this. I don't have a problem with it. Whether 10 people is the right number of people, it's certainly not going to be too few people. It might be too many to get things done efficiently. And whether or not people are better, voters are better served by someone, from their district or at large, is a question I think is worth asking. But again, I'm not wedded to any particular outcome in this. I just think if you're going through a period of internal investigation and inquiry as to what's the best way to run the city, that might be one of the things that could come up. And
Possibly. I will say that there was a redistricting committee for the city and the county. The redistricting committee brought forward recommendations. One of the recommendations for the city was to continue with 5 wards rather than changing that number, and to continue with 2 representatives on each ward. And so Common Council discussed, reviewed that, and voted to accept that recommendation. So we will have going forward 5 wards with 2 representatives in each ward.
That's perfectly acceptable. I would accept that too. I don't know that I would agree to it without understanding, but anybody could explain it to me because you had a discussion about why it was a good idea. So nobody has to, but if anybody wanted to, I would be happy to listen.
Okay. Any other questions for us, Carol?
Sounds like a fair bit of work to be an alderman on account of, especially when you're starting out, you don't know how it all works. And so I guess patience on the part of one's colleagues is a decent way to be. Just wanted to mention that.
Yeah.
Yes, and it can be a fair amount of work. It is a part-time position. The hours vary depending on your committee assignments, your liaison assignments, and the month. It tends to be the case that during budget season, there are more meetings. So there is some work that is seasonal. And you mentioned earlier that, doing background reading on particular issues can be helpful, not required, but to get up to speed, there is a learning curve for sure.
Yeah, I'd agree. Most of us do have the experience of feeling a little overwhelmed at first, as you all think you're prepared to a certain level, and you're probably not. So yeah, we know what it's like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any last question for us, Carol?
No, I just want to apologize I thought to myself, well, maybe I should just try out this Zoom technology again before 2:30 comes, and then I was thinking about of doing it, and I didn't. So I'm sorry about that.
All right.
No problem. No problem.
But it worked out.
All right. Well, I'm not sure that I mentioned our timeline. So we are interviewing folks today and tomorrow. We will be sharing the video interviews with our colleagues, and have the goal of taking a recommendation to Common Council for the February 1 Common Council meeting.
Gotcha. And
Okay.
so you're going to announce it. Announce the pick, Chico. You announce the pick at the meeting, or if someone has to be ready to be to attend the meeting.
Attend, yes, because the person will be seated if there is agreement amongst the vacancy committee and council as a whole. The person will be sworn in, at the February 1st meeting.
I see. So you notify it by someone a week or two before that? Is that how it goes?
Yeah, we haven't decided the actual date, the exact date that we would be notifying candidates, but yes, we will share information with each of the people who've applied.
Good, thank you very much. It's a little nerve-wracking when you're waiting to hear one way or another, not to know that, when you might hear or as you've been disqualified, dropped out, so forth and so on. I trust you just do it the best you can, and we'll just on this end deal with it. Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Carol. Very nice to talk with you today. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you very much, too.
Good to see you.
Carol.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Hi, Marty.
Hi.
Thanks for being with us this afternoon. We will spend 30 minutes. We have some prepared questions, also give you time to ask any questions you may have. And before we do that, I should point out that we are being recorded, and these recordings will be shared with our council colleagues as well as the public. Our timeline is that we have interviews today and tomorrow, and we'll then be looking to make a recommendation to council at the February 1st council meeting. Okay.
Okay.
So introductions, Laura, you and I know one another, we're neighbors, and I'm the mayor at the moment, and it's my seat on council that is open at the moment.
Yep.
I'll turn it over to Alderperson Gerhart.
Hi, Marty. Good to see you. I am representing the 3rd ward, and in our vacancy rules, the other member of the 5th ward is here, and then one other member of council, tag.
Okay. Okay.
And hello, Marty. We have course manager as well. I represent you and the 5th ward. So yeah, nice to see you.
Yeah. Hi, Rob.
So Marty, can you begin by sharing with us what you see as the role of alderperson and how you would hope to achieve what you think is important, what you would like to see, what you would like to do on Common Council?
Well, the alderperson, alder people are in charge of legislative decisions. I think of it as being kind of overall management of the direction of the city. The main things we have control over are things like zoning, police, public works. And a lot of it is about representing the people in our wards. So ensuring that their needs get met and that their voices get heard when they have input. And a lot of it is just sort of the general, the city as a business, making sure that it's running on sound principles and isn't going to go bankrupt, those kinds of things.
Okay. And more specifically, what would you hope to achieve as alderperson?
There are a number of things that are happening right now that I'm really interested in. The Green New Deal is a hot subject for me. The public safety is a hot subject for me. I would like to see those initiatives move forward and be successful. I'm interested in ensuring that social justice is served by the way we implement those things. And I'm also, I guess I'm not quite sure how to say this. It seems as though we're having a lot of turmoil in the government right now. There's been turnover and people retiring and concerns about negotiations. And I think a lot of it is related to finances. And so I think I'd like to be able to get a better sense of what's going on financially with the city and how we can improve that situation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. You've maybe begun to touch upon this, but what do you think are the biggest challenges facing the city right now, and how would you address some of those challenges?
I have concerns about what's happening with the staff and the negotiations. I think the step of creating a council liaison position is a really good start in addressing that situation. I also think part of what's going on there is a long-standing state of tension between the city government and the local police force, that, you know, there's been a lot of really vocal opposition to the reimagining initiative. And I think it's really important that the initiative moves forward and that it is successfully implemented. I also think that it is important at some point to find a way to get the local police department cooperating with that initiative instead of fighting it. And how to bring that about, I'm not sure. But I think that that is something that we really need to pay attention to.
So that second part of the question was how you as an alderperson would address some of the biggest challenges.
When I see a conflict like that, my first instinct is to listen and understand better what's going on. And I know that there is strong vocal opposition. I know that there's a standoff, right? But how you would go about turning that around is something that requires listening. And so that's always my first instinct when I see that kind of a situation. And I think that's true, you know, with the salary negotiations with staff as well, that the first step is to have a deeper understanding of what's going on, what the motivations are, what the fears are. You know, when you know what people are motivated by, that gives you insight into how to shift the situation.
So the flip side of challenges, of course, is opportunities. And what do you see as the biggest opportunities in Ithaca right now?
I'm really excited by the Green New Deal. There have been some recent setbacks in it, but I think we still have a really strong commitment to it. You know, I'm pleased that there's a new commission that is dedicated to that issue. I think it's likely that the new state environmental bond will provide at some point access to funding that could be used to further that initiative. And I'm, you know, excited at seeing us progress toward a more sustainable city.
Thank you. How, if you were an alderperson, how would you both connect with constituents and help constituents connect with city government?
I think the standard ways are, emails, phone calls, public comments. I think the Fall Creek listserv is a great resource for communicating with people. I'm very available to talk when anyone, has concerns.
Okay. We also very much want to allow people who've applied for this position to offer closing comments, to share with us anything that has not been addressed in these questions. So do you have a closing statement or anything you want us to know about you?
I didn't prepare anything. I think I've been involved in public service in one way or another for many years now. I have a wide range of skills that I've developed through working, largely with nonprofit organizations. I've been in contentious negotiation situations before. I have a track record of succeeding and bringing things through to conclusion. And the reason I was motivated to run last year is because I saw those skills as being a good fit with the needs of the city. I believe that I would be able to be helpful, to be an asset to the city if I were in this position.
Thank you. Thank you. We also want to allow time for you to ask any questions of us.
What are you looking for in these candidates specifically?
Turn to my colleagues first.
Maybe just in addition to the way this was described in the application process, and to your point, there are many things that we deal with in council across a wide spectrum of issues that really benefit from people who have had experience in trying to solve problems and move those forward. And that happens, with, whether that's a lot of experience or little experience, and just being able to demonstrate that, I think is a really important asset that comes along with the role. I don't know if Rob or Laura have other things to add, but that's something that I find has been really helpful for me in 7+ years on council.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, Rob. I would like, just expand on that by saying, I've said this before, but it is a part-time responsibility, but it does require a great deal of time and attention sort of in between the meetings, right? And someone who is willing to put that work in to get up to speed on the long-standing projects, the new projects, and to the point that you raised, right? We have 2 major initiatives that the city is moving forward on, and we need key input from policymakers to realize the potential for those. And so, understanding that the work isn't just the meetings, it's everything, that goes with that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll echo that as well. There's a fair amount of prep work, reading materials that are presented in committees, and there are 2 standing committees, and the work of council comes up through our standing committees for the most part. So when something arrives on the council floor at council meetings, there is often the opportunity for that to be flushed out in committee meetings.
Mhm.
Um, But yes, being able to balance all the committee work. As mentioned, we have 2 standing committees, and then we have council members who serve in liaison roles with other departments and organizations, and it is a balancing act and requires background work before getting to committee meetings.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I do have a history of diving into things. When I get involved in a project, I'm usually all in. So, um, yeah. So, so I know about the 2 main committees, the admin and the planning. But there are a lot of other liaison roles and smaller things, and I don't feel like I have a clear picture of what all of those are. Is there a place where there's a list available of what those other liaison roles are?
It's a great question. I'm not sure there is a place where they all exist in one location. I think you could see a lot of the committees that are city committees or commissions or boards
Mhm.
that all have web pages that outline who the members are, and you'll often see the common council liaison listed
Okay.
among those. But many of our appointments are outside of city committees, boards, and commissions, and so those might not be as readily evident. And so it's the kind of thing, we're going through that process right now. The mayor is about to make those assignments public pretty soon for this year, and that's usually when we see them all in one place.
Oh, okay. So if I looked at last year, I might be able
Yeah,
to find
something
out.
like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
And how would the new Ward 5 representative get folded into that?
Well, that's a really good question. I will be looking at who the individual is, what their experience and skill set is in making a decision about assignment to one of the 2 standing committees, and similarly, making assignments to the for liaison assignment. So for example, to Rob's point, we have a liaison to Southside Community Center.
Mhm.
We have other liaisons to a number of organizations. Liaison roles are intended to be an information conduit.
Okay.
So Common Council will share relevant information, whether it is with Southside Community Center or the Ithaca Urban Renewal Agency, and then take information from those organizations and bring it back to Common Council. So at every council meeting, there's opportunity for liaison reports. There's liaison to the special joint committee, for example, at the wastewater treatment facility. Liaison assignments in general are non-voting appointments, which is unlike, of course, our standing committees. Council members on our standing committees have full votes.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, just a reminder. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm just thinking about, what else. Yeah,
That's
I'm
okay.
good.
Yeah. Just reminder on our timeline. We have interviews, I believe I may have mentioned today and tomorrow, and we'll plan to bring a recommendation to Common Council in February. So the vacancy committee conducts the interviews and then discusses and brings forward a recommendation, but it is common council that actually votes on our recommendation.
Mhm. Okay, now would the person, so if the recommended person is accepted at the February meeting, would they be sworn in immediately? Okay,
Yes.
That's the
Yeah,
plan.
so for example, last night at our first common council meeting for the year, we do have a new fourth ward representative. and
Yeah,
that
yeah,
representative
Kumar.
came in Last night.
Mhm.
This would require, and that's a standard procedure. This would require a special meeting of common council to occur immediately before we convene the February meeting.
Okay,
So the person would be seated in that special committee meeting, so would have full voting powers once we went into our February meeting.
okay. Okay, so you would start a little early to make that happen. Yeah.
Yes.
That's the plan, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you for meeting with us this afternoon. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you.
All right. Take care, Marty.
Thanks very
Yeah,
much, everyone.
thanks. Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.